At 9:17 a.m. on January 22, 1943, Second Lieutenant John George lay absolutely motionless inside the shattered remains of a Japanese bunker west of Point Cruz on Guadalcanal. The concrete walls around him were cracked and blackened from earlier fighting. Torn sandbags leaked sand onto the floor. The air smelled of damp earth, burned cordite, and rot. Sweat soaked his uniform and trickled down his spine, but he did not move, not even to blink. 240 yards away, rising out of the jungle canopy like a living fortress, stood a massive banyan tree. Its trunk was nearly 8 feet thick, its branches spread outward in every direction, overlapping, twisting, creating natural platforms hidden in shadow. George watched that tree through the glass of a rifle scope that most of the officers in his battalion had laughed at for weeks. Second Lieutenant John George was 27 years old. He was an Illinois state shooting champion, and until this moment, he had never killed anyone in combat. For 6 weeks, his fellow officers had mocked the rifle resting against his shoulder. Some called it a toy, others called it a hunting rifle. One platoon leader joked that it belonged in a deer stand back home, not in a jungle war against the Japanese Empire. Someone started calling it his mail-order sweetheart, and the name spread through the regiment. That rifle was a Winchester Model 70, bolt-action, fitted with a Lyman Alaskan scope, a civilian rifle George had purchased himself through a catalog using 2 years of National Guard pay. Everything about it violated the Army's idea of modern warfare. It wasn't standardized, it wasn't semi-automatic, it wasn't issued. But now, in the Point Cruz groves, it was the only thing standing between the battalion and death falling from the trees. Over the previous 72 hours, Japanese snipers operating in the coastal jungle west of Point Cruz had killed 14 American soldiers. They fired from trees. They fired once, then waited. They watched patrols pass beneath them, sometimes twice before choosing their shot. They killed men filling canteens, men adjusting equipment, men who never even knew they were being watched. Malaria was already ripping through the regiment. Now snipers were killing men even faster. The battalion commander was desperate, and desperation had finally overridden ridicule. John George had been summoned the night before. The commander did not joke, he did not mock the rifle. He asked one direct question. Could that mail-order civilian weapon actually hit anything at distance? George answered calmly. Illinois State Championship at 1,000 yards, 6-inch groups at 600 yards with iron sights. It can't parry, he could put 5 rounds inside 4 inches at 300 yards using the Lyman scope. He did not brag, he did not embellish, he stated facts. The commander gave him one warning. If the rifle worked, George stayed. If it didn't, the rifle went back in the tent and George would carry a Garand like everyone else. That morning, George lay in the ruins of the bunker, alone. No spotter, no radio, just a canteen, 60 rounds of .30-06 ammunition in stripper clips, and the rifle everyone had laughed at. The Lyman Alaskan scope provided only 2.5 times magnification, barely enough to call it a sniper optic, but George had learned years earlier that magnification did not make a shooter accurate. Discipline did. Magnification only revealed mistakes. The jungle was never silent. Birds called, insects buzzed, somewhere far off artillery thumped. George filtered it all out. He searched the banyan tree slowly, left to right, top to bottom, branch by branch, shadow by shadow. At exactly 9:17 a.m., something moved. A branch shifted. There was no wind. 87 feet above the ground, deep in the fork of the banyan tree, a shape changed position. George did not fire immediately. He watched. Japanese snipers were patient, but so was he. The branch moved again. This time the shape resolved into something unmistakably human. A man in dark clothing, positioned perfectly in the natural cradle of 3 branches. The sniper was facing east, watching the trail where American supplies moved through the groves. George adjusted the scope. 2 clicks right for wind. He controlled his breathing. The trigger on the Winchester broke like glass. He had spent hours adjusting it years earlier. Now it mattered. The rifle fired. The crack echoed through the jungle. 240 yards away, the Japanese sniper jerked violently, lost balance, and fell. His body tumbled through branches before slamming into the ground at the base of the tree. George worked the bolt smoothly, ejecting the spent cartridge. He stayed on the scope. Japanese snipers did not work alone. At 9:43 a.m., George spotted movement 60 yards north, another tree, another shape. This one was lower, climbing down. The second sniper had heard the shot and abandoning position. George fired. The second man fell backward. His rifle clattered through the branches as his body followed. 2 shots, 2 kills, no wasted movement, no celebration. At 11:21 a.m., a Japanese bullet slammed into the sandbag 6 inches from George's head. Dirt sprayed across his face. The shot came from the southwest. George pressed himself flat against the bunker wall and waited. He did not rush. The sniper who fired would relocate or think he had already won. 17 minutes later, he found him. Third shot, third body falling through the canopy. By noon, 5 Japanese snipers were dead, and the jungle around Point Cruz fell unnaturally quiet. Men in the battalion whispered about the rifle now. Some asked to watch. George refused. Spectators drew attention. Attention brought fire. The Japanese adapted. They stopped moving during daylight. They waited for rain. They shifted positions. They tried mortars. George adapted faster. He moved positions, changed angles, used elevation, used patience, used their own doctrine against them. By the end of January 23rd, 8 snipers were dead. By January 24th, the last survivors knew exactly who was hunting them, and they decided to hunt him back. The rain began early on the morning of January 24th, falling in thick sheets that turned the jungle floor into a quagmire of mud and tangled vegetation. Visibility was minimal. For most men, this would have been an obstacle. For George, it was an advantage. He moved silently, carefully, to a new position 70 yards south of his previous location, a cluster of rocks left behind from a Marine machine gun nest months earlier. The rocks offered excellent cover in overlapping fields of fire into the Point Cruz groves. Here he could observe the jungle without being easily seen, and the heavy rainfall muted any sound of movement. By 8:17 a.m., the rain had reduced to a drizzle, revealing a faint outline of a palm tree 190 yards away. Low in the fronds, about 40 feet up, was a figure. It seemed like an easy shot, too easy. George had spent 3 days hunting Japanese snipers. He had killed 8 of them with precision, patience, and discipline. He knew better than to trust an easy target. The palm tree sniper could very well be bait. Any experienced marksman in the Japanese army would know a bait and trap setup when they saw it. George scanned methodically, left to right, top to bottom, every tree within 300 yards. The jungle was alive with shadows and shapes, most of them deceptive, designed to mislead the unwary. 11 minutes passed. Then he saw it, a banyan tree 80 yards northwest of the palm tree, 91 feet tall, perfectly hidden, every branch and vine positioned to conceal the sniper from view, except for one line of sight aimed at where George would likely appear. The real threat had been waiting, observing, calculating. George understood instantly that this would be the ultimate test of his skill, patience, and judgment. The bait sniper on the palm tree was a decoy, meant to lure him out. The actual sniper, the 11th and presumably the most experienced, had positioned himself to cover every escape route, every potential angle. George could not engage both simultaneously without risking exposure. The bolt-action rifle he carried required manual operation between shots. Firing at both would give away his position and allow the remaining enemy to locate him. He needed a plan. Slowly, he submerged himself deeper into the water of the drainage crater he had chosen as his hiding place. Only his eyes and the top of his head remained above the surface. The barrel of his Winchester was held vertical to prevent water from entering. He remained motionless, listening. The sounds of movement were distinct, the crackle of broken branches, the rustle of foliage, the hurried whispers of Japanese soldiers moving closer to investigate fallen comrades. 6 men at least moving towards the bodies he had just dispatched. infantry, not snipers, sent to recover or engage him. The odds were grim. 5 rounds in his rifle, 6 enemies, and the cover he had relied on was now compromised. He waited, calculating, planning. At 10:31 a.m., a Japanese soldier appeared at the rim of the crater, their eyes meeting for a brief moment. George fired, the rifle cracking through the rain-filled air. The soldier dropped. Another followed almost immediately as he raised his weapon. 3 rounds remained. Shouts and movement indicated more troops advancing from multiple directions. George's strategic mind raced. Engaging in a firefight was impossible. His bolt-action rifle could not compete with multiple semi-automatic weapons at close range. He made the decision to break contact. Moving north, he sprinted through the undergrowth, vines and branches lashing his face, bullets cracking past him. He reached another shell crater, dry this time, and used it for cover, pressing himself against the wall as he observed the enemy regrouping around their fallen. By 10:47 a.m., he began moving northeast toward American lines, avoiding running to maintain stealth, using the dense jungle as cover. Each step was measured, each breath controlled. He crossed muddy terrain, past fallen trees, and listened for any sound that might reveal him. By 11:13 a.m., he reached the American perimeter. A Marine sentry challenged him, but upon identification, George was escorted safely to battalion headquarters. He reported 8 confirmed kills over the previous 2 days, 12 rounds fired, 4 misses, a remarkable ratio considering the circumstances. The Japanese threat and point crews had been neutralized, but George's engagement had revealed the harsh realities of sniper warfare, precision, patience, and the constant need to adapt. His commanding officer, Captain Morris, understood the significance of George's accomplishments. The battalion's previous 2-week attempts had failed to clear the groves. George had done it alone in 4 days. Recognizing his skill, Morris recommended that George train a specialized sniper section. By January 27th, George had assembled 40 expert marksmen, men who were proficient with rifles on paper but had no experience in combat sniping. The rifles provided were Springfield rifles with inertial scopes, heavier than the Garand, less balanced than George's Winchester, yet capable. Training began in earnest, focusing on breathing control, trigger discipline, range estimation, concealment, and reading the jungle terrain. Targets ranged from stationary to partially obscured by foliage, simulating real-life conditions. After 3 days, 32 men were consistently hitting man-sized targets at 300 yards, demonstrating rapid assimilation of skills. George paired them into shooter-spotter teams, emphasizing coordination, communication, and tactical movement. On February 1st, George led 4 teams into the field, tasked with clearing remaining Japanese positions west of the Matanaka River. The teams set up ambushes on high ground, scanning jungle trails for enemy movement. George partnered with Corporal Hayes, his spotter. At 7:20 a.m., a Japanese soldier appeared. Hayes confirmed the target, George fired, and the soldier dropped. Over 6 hours, they engaged 7 more soldiers, 6 hits, 1 miss due to wind. Other teams reported similar success. In a single day, 23 confirmed kills were achieved with 0 American casualties. Over the next week, sniper operations continued, culminating on February 9th with 74 confirmed kills, showcasing the extraordinary efficacy of a trained sniper section in jungle warfare. George's success drew recognition. He was recommended for a Bronze Star, but operational needs pulled him into a new theater. In March, he was transported to India for deployment with a newly formed unit that would become Merrill's Marauders, designed for deep penetration jungle operations in Burma. The Marauders faced extreme conditions: mountainous terrain, dense jungle, no roads, limited trails, and no artillery support. Supplies were carried on foot or by pack mules. George's role was initially listed as a rifle platoon leader, but his Guadalcanal performance ensured he would operate as the unit's unofficial sniper. He modified his Winchester for long-range patrols, replacing the scope with a lighter Weaver and the stock with a synthetic version, reducing the weight without compromising accuracy. From February to May 1944, George's battalion marched hundreds of miles through northern Burma, engaging the Japanese 12 times, often in small, intense skirmishes. The Marauders operated without support, relying on skill, tactics, and stealth. George's Winchester was used sparingly, each shot deliberate. He fired 3 times during the march, at a Japanese officer directing troops at a river crossing, 412 yards, at a machine gun position, 380 yards, and a sniper pinning down a patrol, 290 yards. Each shot was lethal, precise, and followed by immediate relocation. The unit reached the Makina airfield after covering over 700 miles of treacherous terrain. Casualties were severe, mostly due to disease rather than combat. The Marauders were combat ineffective by the time they captured the objective, but the mission succeeded, demonstrating the efficacy of long-range marksmanship in small unit mobility. George survived the campaign and returned to the United States by mid-1944. Promoted to captain, he was assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia, to train infantry officers in marksmanship, jungle warfare, and independent operations. His Winchester, which had seen action from Guadalcanal to Burma, remained with him, a testament to the lethal precision that could be achieved by a disciplined marksman. In January 1947, George was discharged, having earned 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, and the Combat Infantry Badge. He returned to civilian life, enrolling at Princeton University on the GI Bill, later studying at Oxford and in East Africa, eventually moving to Washington, D.C., where he worked as the executive director of the Institute of African American Relations, later joining the State Department's Foreign Affairs Institute as a consultant and lecturer on African affairs. Through all these roles, he rarely spoke of his military past. Colleagues knew he had served, but few understood the magnitude of what he had accomplished in the Point Cruz groves or in the jungles of Burma. The details of the Japanese snipers, the 8-day solo operations, the bolt-action Winchester, the training of the sniper teams, these remained largely unknown to the world. In 1947, George began writing a detailed manuscript of his wartime experiences. He didn't intend it for publication. It was a technical record, a way to document the strategies, weapons, and tactics that proved effective in jungle warfare while the memory was still fresh. The manuscript grew over 6 months into more than 400 pages, meticulously detailing every engagement, every rifle adjustment, every observation on enemy behavior, and the nuances of camouflage and concealment. A friend at the National Rifle Association reviewed the manuscript and suggested it be published. Initially reluctant, George eventually agreed, and the book, Shots Fired in Anger, became a seminal work among firearms enthusiasts and military historians. It offered no embellishment, no glorification, just the raw, clinical truth of combat, emphasizing skill, planning, and precision. The book's publication solidified George's legacy. It described in precise terms how a civilian rifle and a disciplined marksman could outperform traditional military expectations. His accounts of the Winchester Model 70 in Guadalcanal's Point Cruz groves, where he eliminated 11 Japanese snipers over 4 days, highlighted how expertise and methodical practice could surpass brute force or sheer numbers. Even decades later, the book served as a reference for military strategists, collectors, and enthusiasts eager to understand the intricacies of long-range marksmanship and jungle warfare. George's descriptions of Japanese sniper techniques, the layout of terrain, and the physics of ballistics provided insights that were rare in contemporary accounts. George's own rifle, the Winchester Model 70, became an artifact of history. It was eventually donated to the National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia, where it remains on display. Encased and preserved, it looks like any other vintage hunting rifle, yet it represents much more. It is a testament to the skill of a man who, with a mail-order rifle and an intimate knowledge of marksmanship, cleared the Point Cruz groves in 4 days, a task an entire battalion could not achieve in 2 weeks. Visitors may glance at it without understanding its significance, but the rifle tells a story of precision, courage, and the immense impact of individual skill on the outcome of combat operations. Throughout his post-war life, George witnessed the evolution of military weaponry and tactics. He saw the rise of semi-automatic rifles, the development of specialized sniper units, and the standardization of military equipment. The principles he had employed, the importance of patience, observation, camouflage, and precision, remained timeless. Modern warfare had shifted toward mass production and uniformity, yet George's experiences reminded him that even in a mechanized, industrialized military, individual skill could make the difference between life and death. In his later years, George often reflected on the men he had fought alongside and the adversaries he had faced. He understood that war was not only a matter of firepower, but of strategy, preparation, and courage. The Point Cruz engagement, the long patrols through Burma, and the mentoring of other marksmen demonstrated how one individual, properly trained and equipped, could shape the outcome of engagements in critical moments. George never sought fame. He valued competence and integrity above recognition, yet his actions had ensured that the lessons of Guadalcanal would be remembered, studied, and appreciated by future generations. By the time of his passing on January 3, 2009, John George had lived a long life filled with service, scholarship, and quiet heroism. He reached the age of 90, leaving behind a legacy that spanned continents, conflicts, and decades of evolving military history. The Winchester Model 70 that had accompanied him from Illinois to Tennessee, through the jungles of Guadalcanal and Burma, and finally to the National Firearms Museum, remains a symbol of excellence in marksmanship and the profound impact one determined individual can have on combat. George's story is more than a historical account. It is a reminder of human ingenuity under pressure, the precision required in life-or-death situations, and the enduring value of individual skill in the face of overwhelming odds. In the grand sweep of World War II, his actions in Point Cruz and Burma might seem like small episodes, yet they encapsulate the essence of personal discipline, mastery of craft, and the quiet heroism that often goes unnoticed in the annals of history.